I was sent around the country by the Nashville Network to go to different cities, and one of the cities we went to was Salt Lake. Well, we went out to all the sites in Salt Lake, the Mormon Tabernacle, and all the beauty in the surrounding mountains, and of course the lake. And as we were getting ready to leave, the producer said, we've forgotten one thing here. Somebody's got to go in that water and show that you can float in it, that you don't really even have to swim, you just get in the water and float. Well, the water was absolutely nasty. I mean, there were flies all over it and stuff floating in it. He said, Holt, you got to do it. So I got in the car and got my bathing suit on and got in that water. And I'm out there doing the stand-up with my hat on. There's flies all around me. Luckily, you can't see them in the video, but it was terrible. I got out, and just for you, I did that.
In 1847, Brigham Young and a group of pioneers came across the Rocky Mountains looking for a home for the Mormons that he had seen in a vision. I'm David Holt, and this week the Celebration Express brings you to Salt Lake City.
Upon arrival, Brigham Young and his followers began building their mother church in what is now Temple Square in downtown Salt Lake City. They were master architects, as is evident in the Mormon Temple building, as well as in the Mormon Tabernacle, home of one of the most impressive choirs in the world. There are only 2 full-time positions in the choir. One of those is the conductor, and the other full-time position is the organist. The Tabernacle Hall was designed specifically for the choir and organ, and according to organist John Longhurst, it's the combination of this building, singers, and this organ that has created the world-famous sound of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
Through 60 years of broadcasting, which is a remarkable milestone in the Tabernacle Choir, the Tabernacle organ has become widely known throughout the United States and the world, and for many people has what you might call a signature sound, largely a result not only of the organ itself, but the magnificent room in which it is housed.
Brigham Young founded this city as home for the Mormon Church, and every year thousands of people come to hear the sounds of the choir and enjoy the beauty of the tabernacle. But they also come to see one of America's natural wonders, the Great Salt Lake. There are many myths and stories surrounding the Great Salt Lake. When Jim Bridger discovered it, he thought it was the Pacific Ocean, which is not so hard to believe since it's 90 miles across in some places. There's also tales of sea monsters and whales living in the water, but actually it's so salty that only brine shrimp can live there. But there are stories about the Great Salt Lake that are just as fantastic and are true.
The Great Salt Lake is the largest salt lake in America, and by far the saltiest, 8 times as salty as the ocean. For 100 years, curious visitors have come here to bob up and down in this water like a cork. To capitalize on this popularity, beach resorts were built along the shore, the most famous of which was Saltair, built in 1893. Since that time, there have been 3 Saltair resorts, each one of them destroyed and reclaimed by this mysterious salt lake. Most people think that this lake has always been the same size, but that's far from the truth. Since the 1850s, the Salt Lake has risen to a record high level 3 times and a record low level twice, wreaking havoc on resorts like Saltair. The first Saltair survived flooding but was destroyed by a freak fire. Saltair too survived a drought in the 1930s, but 20 years later, the lake dried up, leaving the resort nearly a half mile from shore, which put them out of business. The third Saltair opened in 1983, but lasted only a year before the lake rose again, flooding the parking lot and ballroom. And 3 years later, the lake was still rising.
By 1987, the main floor of this building was submerged in 6 feet of water. Now the lake has started to recede, and they hope within a few years they'll be able to rebuild Saltair. More power to them.
It will take a lot of work to put Saltair back in business, and when they do reopen, there's no telling what the Great Salt Lake will have in store. This salton sea has a mind of its own.
The rise and fall of the Great Salt Lake has been pretty hard on the tourist industry here, but I think it'll all come back. After all, this is a spectacular place, and there's one thing you can do here better than anywhere else, and that's float. This is David Holt in the Great Salt Lake for the Celebration Express.